I am really excited to come here today and introduce you to a really amazing audiobook studio manager who is Rich from Electric Breeze Audio Productions. He is absolutely lovely. He has helped me and my daughter Olivia with our audiobook narrating, and I can't wait for you to hear what he's got to say. This is really exciting for you because, as Rich said earlier, the genie is out of the bag, so to speak, that we are all becoming more self-empowered with what we can own, our own work, our own creativity, and empower ourselves with knowledge. The knowledge is coming out. People are sharing that knowledge, and you'll see that Rich and I are both doing courses that is going to be absolutely invaluable to narrators and writers accordingly. So what I'm going to do is start asking Rich some questions, and then I'm going to get him to tell you about his course. And I'm so thrilled because I didn't actually know that he was going to do this course. So I'm really excited to learn because I think it will help me and my daughter with our narrating too. So, Rich, thank you so much for doing this interview.
Pleasure.
Always a pleasure to spend time with you. I'm
Thank
so
you.
excited. I think what you're offering, we'll come back to that in a moment. I'm really thrilled though.
Great.
So what I wanted to do is first start off with asking you a little bit about experience, expertise, and your personal reflection. So I've got a number of questions on this that I think people will feel quite useful to learn from. So for example, the first one is, how many audiobooks have you produced approximately?
I don't know, but we're definitely into the upper hundreds. Okay, probably more. I really don't know. And when you do it for this long, one book kind of merges into another, and so you do, and you know, we've done full productions, we've done editing, so there are many other books that we haven't had the full production side on as well. So we've done the editing and the proofing with some as well. So gosh, yeah, it's a lot. It's an awful lot. Yeah.
How long have you been doing it for now?
So Electric Breeze, we've been here now for 14 years. I've been doing it for 18 years, 19 years. So I've been in it long before it kind of took off. Yeah. So
he knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So this is a great interview. How many self-published authors have you worked with?
Yeah, we've worked with a few, and some of them quite popular people as well. You know, I'd drop a few names here, but Dom Holland, who was Spider-Man's dad. Tom Holland, Spider-Man, his dad Dom is a comedian, very popular in the UK, sort of in the 90s, still now, he's still gigging now. But he went down the self-publishing route because he wanted to retain control of his work, and he's doing quite well. So that's a notable one. There are others. I've just been talking to you about another publisher called Casper Henderson, who is published, but his publisher is not doing audiobooks, so he's had to go down the self-published route with his audio, and quite a few others. You know, so we've done quite a few. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I'm one as well.
Yes, of course, we did your book. Yeah.
What trends have you observed in the audiobook market, and how has it changed recently?
I think the trends have, it's all changed with the introduction of the smartphone. Okay, so when I first started recording audiobooks, I worked for an audio publisher, and our market was libraries, library imprints they were called, which also fed into RNIB, and so there was also Vision Australia, I think was another one that they used to feed to. And so it was a very small market. And then with the advent of the smartphone, you know, I think everybody started to see the potential. And, you know, with music, when music went on, I can't remember what was the download platform for music that everybody hated, or the record companies hated it right at the start, I can't remember now. But anyway, everybody could see the way it was going. So that change has been sort of gradual. But I think now the audiobooks as well have started to pay back for themselves, if that makes sense, because it does take a bit of money to produce audiobooks, and I think they are a slow return. So I think over the last sort of 5 or 6 years, we've hit that sort of pinnacle where the publishers are starting to see the returns now, and so that has helped us grow. Audible have been obviously quite important, I think, in that move as well. Perhaps not so much now because other people are jumping onto it and realising the potential. But I think, Audible is very much a Bovril type thing. A lot of people like them or they don't. But I think you can't take it away from Audible that they did a lot for audiobooks and bringing it to the masses. I think definitely.
For those not in the UK, Bovril is like Marmite. It's a black substance that you add to food or drink as a hot warm drink. So not everybody likes it, but I know some of my American friends will be going, Bovril? What's Bovril?
Yeah, I was trying to think of an American equivalent, but I can't think of one.
They don't have it. It's the same with Marmite. Australia has Vegemite, which is the equivalent. But I lived in America, and there was two things that all my friends loved was Boddingtons. I introduced them to Boddingtons and Marmite, and that was hit and miss. Some just like trying it to say it's gross. How do you approach the art of storytelling through audio, and what makes a good audiobook recording?
Gosh, that's such a loaded question, really.
It's a bad one, isn't it?
Well, it's a good question, but there are so many variables to this, really. The art of storytelling really has to come from the narrator. Well, initially it has to come from the author, and then the narrator has to interpret that in his or her own way, and then we have to, when it comes into the studio, then really it's my job, depending on who I'm working with. I may be working with very experienced actors, so I'm kind of more hands off. Recently we are doing, even with the big publishers, we're doing a lot of author reads. So authors are tending to read their books more as well. So that's a little bit more involved. So you've got to be, you've got to take control of the session, really. Sometimes it's nice to sit back with an experienced narrator. But then, I did a book a few months ago with a young lady who was brilliant. She did her first book, very nervous. She needed a little bit of coaching, but she did a fantastic job. So, it kind of depends. But the approach is, overall, the important thing is preparation from all sides. And that comes from the publisher's got to be, they've got to be on the ball. I need the script. We need the script in time. I need the finished script, the finished version of the script. The same with the narrator. So the narrator has to do all their preparation. They have to prepare the characters. And then sort of bring that story alive. That's the whole intention, really. I think I think that's what makes a good audiobook recording for me, is based on good preparation. I think it's the same with anything, really. I think you've got to
be prepared, be organised.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, okay. and I think that's key to every part of that, every stage of the production.
Okay. Yeah, makes sense. And how about your history of this studio over the last 14 years and its evolution in the audio industry? Has it been consistent? Has it changed? Has it been quite a journey?
It's been a journey, and I think my history came from music initially. So I started off in music. I fell into a job working with an audio purely by accident, really. I knew I wanted to work with audio. And I was very fortunate. I found a job with an audio publisher, and so it was a bit of a learning curve for me. But also, it was the great thing about it is wow, there's more to recording and editing than just music. I can take these skills that I've learnt over these few years, and I can use it for myself. So I had a very good sort of bed, if you like, for training, and it was very thorough. And then I left that because I thought, you know what, I can do this myself, or have a go at doing this myself. The toughest part, I think, is I knew the job. The toughest part is running a company. Okay, so that was the learning curve for me. But then, of course, you've got to build your company. You've got to build the contacts. I had built a few contacts whilst I was working for this company, mainly narrators. So we went into it very blind. I say we. I did it with my wife. We decided, she was still working, but I was the one that kind of left that job and we went for it. So the development, it's kind of been up and down. Obviously, COVID was a strange experience, not a bad experience, because we did quite well out of it. I'm not talking about financially. I'm talking about the work. increased actually.
Everyone
because
was at
people were
home
buying,
all the
everybody
time,
was at home. The changes came where we had to sort of evolve, okay, and we had to work out, well, how are we going to do this now? We haven't got a studio, but there are so many different models for audiobook production that we kind of melded all of these sort of methods that people have been using for years into one and managed to do it across the internet, which was really good. For us as a company, yeah, it's not been an easy journey. It's been really enjoyable, but it hasn't made us millionaires yet.
I know that feeling.
but
actually, come on,
that's not such a bad thing, because I feel very fortunate. I feel very blessed. I'm doing something that I love doing. I'm making a living from it. I've learned so much, and it's a constant learning experience.
I think enjoying it is the most important part.
Absolutely.
You've got to enjoy the journey.
You've got to enjoy it, and I think if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't be doing it. And I think if you're self-employed as well, and you're trying to do this, you're trying to get through this, doing everything by yourself and being your own boss. I commend anybody that does that. It's fantastic. It's really good being your own boss, but it does come with risk. It does come with financial risk. It comes with, you've got to be prepared to answer emails at.
And it's round the clock, isn't it?
Yeah,
it's just round the clock. You don't get to switch off and do a break.
Yeah,
because you're doing your job on top of your actual company work.
Yeah, and well, that's right. And being a small company is quite difficult for us to expand. Actually, in this industry, it is quite difficult to expand. So what we tend to do is use freelancers. That's the model that we use. So everything. We've got the core company, which is myself, my wife, and then we've got a school, if you like, of freelancers, friends that I've worked with in the past that I trust, that we put that work out to, and it works really well. And so in terms of that, it's kind of going along quite nicely, really.
Yeah.
In terms of up and down, it depends where it costs a lot of money to run a studio as well. So, to build a studio, you've got the maintenance fees and equipment failures, and so everything has to be replaced. You've got to kind of keep up with the Joneses.
And you'd have to have double of everything as backups, I suppose, wouldn't you? Or can you get parts quick?
Yeah, well, it's funny because you can get parts fairly quickly. Lockdown, COVID was a good lesson for us, because we've gone from having 2 studios. We had our last premises was cheap enough for us to afford to have 2 studios, so we had 2 studios. We had to move because the lease on that building had gone, so we were forced into a position where we had to move. So we moved to this, a little bit more pricey in this side of town, because we're kind of right in the centre of town, so the prices went up. But lockdown actually created another sort of point it added something else to the business model, because we were able to work remote. We can work at the studio, but I can also work remotely. So if somebody comes along and says, well, Rich, we need this book by this time, and the studio's booked, then I've got my team that can produce from home across the line, and so they can do that side of it remotely. And some publishers are quite happy to do that now. So the ones that aren't quite so happy, then they're the ones that will come to the studio. So it was good. So yeah, it's been a learning curve, and I think it's been more about running a business, and also the trends, the changes, and of course there are so many other things now to contend with, AI being the obvious one for us. But I think we can work with that as opposed to working against it or being fearful of it. I think there are ways that we can work with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Use it as a tool.
Absolutely, which I think is the way it needs to be viewed.
Yeah.
I think it can be very scary. It is a scary sort of option, and I know there are narrators out there that are going, crumbs, this is a sound of a job.
Well, I have cover designers worrying, and even writers worrying about the same thing, but I work in IT with AI, and it is not able to replace us, because we know ourselves when we listen to an audiobook that is AI, I can't bear it. Can't get into it. There's no human soul in it.
There's no soul. They are getting better. Funnily enough, I did a podcast a few months ago with a very well-known actor, Tim Bentinck, and Tim plays David on The Archers. He's David Archer. And I've worked with Tim and his sister Anna Bentinck many times over the years. Tim's a bit of a techie. He's got his home studio. He's very well versed in technology. And before he became an actor, he was a programmer. So right back in the early days. So he's followed this development of technology. And we did a really interesting thing where he played me a chapter that he'd recorded with AI about 2 years ago. And it was very stilted, and you could tell it was, but then he played me one he'd done recently, and it kind of blew me away. I was kind of like, whoa, there's a change. But you can still hear it. I don't, I mean, it's a really tough thing because, I think I much prefer a human voice. I'm going to say that.
I think everyone does. I don't think anyone should be scared of AI. Because I'm an energy worker, right? So the way I look at it is we are attracted to somebody's energy. Nowadays, you don't buy a book because it's good or by the cover. We invest in who the author is, which is why the author is the one on social media.
And there are also parts of audiobook narration which are so human in terms of, and by that what I mean is there may be a passage in a book where a narrator stops, takes a breath and a pause, and you can feel it kind of hanging there, and I don't think AI can do that because AI is just moving from word to word to word to word. Even a breath can make a sentence, a paragraph, a book. If a narrator does it really well, it's those parts that can kind of make it real. And so I don't think AI is quite there yet, because I mean you'd be able, how do you program the breaths?
But even if it was, there's no heart and soul in it. This is why we can't connect to it.
Yeah.
Have you ever, this is the example I gave to some of my creative friends who were worried about this, and this is a really good point to make. If you scroll through something like TikTok and you come across the AI advertising and commentary, how many of us that I know, let's go by not what we are told in numbers, because it's like, oh, I've done this with AI and look at all my followers, they're bots. You look at those bots, there's no creativity in there. It's all new. They've got 2 or 3 or no posts. It's all bots, so it's all made up. How many of us and how many people do we individually and personally know who's gone, oh, I'm going to buy that? We don't buy from this AI stuff.
No.
But people buy the AI that's being sold in the hope that they will get as many followers as that person that are dead followers. There's no point. It's all a big con.
It is a bit.
We don't buy it because we're not pulled to it because it's not real.
I think as well we've kind of grown into that. We can, because we've lived a life before most of this, the digital realm, as it were. So we kind of, I think we err on the side of caution naturally. I think anybody in this industry has got to you've got to move with the technology, but I think there comes a point where, I'm a big believer in, when it comes to recording and editing, I can use that technology to do the job for me, to make my job quicker, make me become more efficient, which is fantastic. But every now and again, you come across a problem which you can't fix with AI, right? There might be an edit in there, it might be a glitch, it might be a click, and it's like, however much you try with the AI, it won't shift it. So then what you've got to do is you've got to go back and you've got to go in manually and look at the waveform. And this is where you've got to have a little bit of knowledge. And this is why I was, really thankful for the training that I had initially in editing, because I was taught to edit properly. I mean, going back before that, I was in the Navy for years as a sonar operator, so I'd worked with tape as well. And so, I knew how to manipulate tape, but digital was a different kettle of fish, really. And you've got the visual interpretation in front of you. You can zoom in, you can zoom out, and you can actually see the waveform. And it's nice to know how it works. And if AI cannot do the job, and it can't do all of it, every now and again you've got to go in and do it manually. And if you can't, it's not going to sound very good.
No.
So I'm all for it, but at the same time, I think it's really good to know how things work. I don't understand how the AI works. I always marvel at this. I mean, my wife would probably sit here and say, I could be in here and would be editing, and she'd be doing the work over that side, and I'll be like, wow, I might have an edit, and I've run it through this bit of software that has just got rid of this thing, and I'm like, I'm marveling, because somebody has had to sit down and write the code, write all of this,
all the algorithm in the background that it's going to follow.
And it blows me away, and I think, wow, this is fantastic. and it's superb, and it really helps me, and I love that side of it. But at the same time, you know, I can't rely on it all of the time, and I don't want to rely on it.
And
all
nobody
the time,
should.
actually.
It's not going to replace. It's going to be a tool to aid us, like Microsoft Word is, like Microsoft Excel is.
Yeah.
You know, I flunked maths and I did computer science, but Excel does the maths I can't.
Yeah, that's
so
right.
we use tools, and as a single mom, I use AI all the time to help me. It speeds things up. It will do my research for me.
Yeah.
And, you know, it saves asking the Google God or getting loads of books out, because, you know, you get loads of books out, sit there, putting all, and then you've got to type it all up. You only have to copy and paste from an AI now, because it's pulled all that research from the big world out there together for you at your fingertips. It's amazing.
Narration, pronunciation is a big thing in audiobooks, you know, and it's so easy now to I mean, we used to have, I've got one over there, sort of the, you know, the Dick Cambridge pronunciation dictionaries, or the BBC pronunciation. We used to have these, you know, these books. I mean, they're obviously still out there, but now it is just, you know, you're doing your prep and just go onto Google or go onto Merriam-Webster or whatever. You've got to be careful, because some of them are American. If you're doing a Brit book, you know, there are obviously slight discrepancies in language and words. You know, classic in America is garage and garage. They use cell, and we use mobile. You know, all these little sort of different. Yeah, it is. All these little differences. Herb and herb. Okay, so that as a producer, these are things that, again, this is experience that you only gather from doing the job for a while, really, and it takes a long time to kind of build up these experiences. I mean, I've heard some audiobooks where, you know, you'll hear some things and it's like, whoa, how did they, you know, but we all make mistakes. I mean, we're not perfect. I mean, you know.
I think we've got the warmth and heart in AI anyway, and my children have grown up with AI, and they see it one of their friends said to me the other day, what's the point? I said, how did your mocks go? Oh, what's the point? AI is going to replace us. No, it's not. I've seen the algorithms. I work with AI. It's never going to be smarter than the person doing the algorithm behind it.
It's the downside, isn't it? That's the one side, and it's a whole other topic. I did a podcast. We do the studio, a podcast company called Freakonomics. Very, very popular podcast based in the States. Use us quite frequently. And because obviously being in Oxford, we've got a lot of academics just down the road. So these academics come out, and we had a great one, and for the life of me, I can't remember his name. Mathematician, programmer, and his argument is, why are kids doing maths exams? Why aren't they doing the maths on the computer? The computer's there now.
Yeah. It's
part of life. And you know, the more I listened to this guy, I was thinking, gosh, yeah, he really has got a point. You know, why are they having? And I think it's going to divide people, because some people say, well, it's like I was saying to you, it's still nice to be able to do something manually.
Yeah.
But you know, the emphasis really in the workplace now for any job, you've got to have some kind of you've got to be IT literate. I think that's
absolutely.
I think it's in any job now.
Yeah.
I think there's a certain level. So why not? Why is the emphasis not on that at school? And you know, I totally agree.
I agree. I think that's where the curriculum at schools is not behind the technology, because we should be learning more.
Yeah.
Because the AI and the software tools are giving us more.
Yeah.
So we should be learning in a different way.
And I say the same about narrators as well, you know, because we do get a lot of narrators that come in that are, you know, trained actors. They're trained actors. They're not necessarily trained voice actors. So they might have one or two modules on the course, but some of them choose to go down that line, and for them it's a huge learning curve. You know, how do you prep the book? I was talking to one of my narrators about this the other week, you know, and when I first started doing this, what struck me was I would work with a particular narrator, and let's say over the period of the year, I may have done 4 or 5 books with them. And what I started to notice was all of the women started to sound the same. Well, you see, what they've done is they've built these characters in, and they're their go-to characters for each book. They will alter them slightly for each book. But if it's a male and he's doing a female voice, they're pretty generic. And so on and so you know, they've got their own template, if you like. So they have their own. That was the thing that struck me. I thought it was quite. But that comes from experience, you know. And a lot of actors that come out, I don't think they really give them much training in terms of. They have modules for audiobook, but I don't think they spend a lot of time in it. So for them it's as much as a learning curve, and getting into the industry it's just as difficult for them as it is for somebody, an author, or somebody like me that edits or records. So I think from every angle, it seems to be one of those industries that it can be quite intimidating to kind of to find a footing, or to get a foot. It can be difficult to get a foot in. Once you get your foot in and you start working, whichever angle you're coming from the author, from the publisher, from the producer, from the narrator, it all starts to get easier. But it's constantly moving. We're constantly changing now. Turnaround times are quicker than they were a few years ago. That's where you say, what are the trends? Turnaround times are quite frightening. A publisher will come to me and say, we need this book in 2 weeks. And,
So what was it 14 years ago? If it's 2 weeks now, what was it
14 years ago? We used to work to a 2 to 3 month schedule. So per book.
Change,
so
isn't it?
So and I have said to people that have come to me and they'll say, oh Rich, I'm an audiobook editor, and I say, well, great. I said, but if they've come from a publisher, I'll say be prepared, because you haven't got the turnaround times that you've got. For them, you've got 2 weeks, and and that's it. And 2 weeks.
Okay, Rich, what has been one of the most memorable experience or projects that you've had in the studio?
Oh gosh, again, there's been quite a few, and I will go back to Tom Holland on this one, because it was unique. It's not every, we've worked with, I've been fortunate enough to work with some well-known people, and it's nice to be trusted. Actually, you feel like you're getting somewhere when the publisher says, oh, we've got such and such going on, and you think, oh great, this is really good, and it's fantastic to get to work with these people. But Tom Holland has to be, and his dad's book was a fantastic experience. And it was brilliant because I was able to bring my kids into the studio, and for about 10 minutes I was really cool.
Cool dad.
I was a cool dad for about 10 minutes, because Tom Holland came walking in there with his dad, and my two were sat there and their chins just hit the table. And so that was brilliant. So memorable, that was probably that one. It was a unique experience, and it wasn't an experience that we get to have that often. 2 or 3 months ago, we had Jeremy Irons in the studio, which again was fantastic, because it was like, wow. And he had some really nice words to say. He was like, oh, this is a really cool setup you've got here. This is really nice.
Oh,
Can I have your card? Of course, Jeremy. So those, generally, obviously, when we get to work with people that we see in film, or we hear on the radio a lot, and authors. Philip Pullman, a classic example. So Philip likes using us, and Philip has been really nice to us, because he's recommended to other guys that aren't published. He's recommended us as well. So that's been really good. And so every now and again, Philip comes in. It's a great pleasure to have him, and such a nice guy, and I love his books. My wife loves his books, and I'm sat here talking to the guy, and it's mind blowing, really. You've got to remember. Sometimes it kind of strikes me, I'm just having this normal conversation with Philip Pullman or Tom Holland or whatever. So those are the ones that stick to mind are meeting some of these fabulous people, and I can hand on heart say that I've all of these people, I don't think I've ever met anybody that has been troublesome, or I haven't really worked in a studio where I've had any kind of ego, which I'm happy about. We get the occasional thing, but generally it's been fantastic. So those are the ones that kind of spring to mind. I have had challenging books. Your books were a bit of a challenge. Not, how should I say this? Should I?
Just no names.
No names.
Not because of
the
writing or the narrator.
Well, this will come back to a point we'll talk about later, no doubt, about production. And so every now and again we do get I get these instances where somebody will say, well, Rich, we've had a book recorded here, got a bit of a problem, can you take it in, can you sort it? Even for well-known publishers, I've had that, where I had a well-known publisher call me up on a Friday night, said, Rich, we've got these books, we've got a problem, can you do them over the weekend, can you get them back by Monday? And I'm saying, well, this is Friday afternoon. You're assuming I'm going to be working over the weekend. How long are the books? And they were 20 hours. And I was like, it's going to take me that. It's going to take me the weekend to download the masters to get on. So these are little things, you know, where things just drop into your lap. And I think sometimes there's that expectation of, or especially when working in audio, where because everybody is almost compartmentalized, I'm not sure how an author, how you sit down and do your job. Publishers, even though they're working with the books, I'm not wholly convinced all of the time that they are aware what happens in the studio and beyond in post.
I've learned a lot. It's been, and just for references, I met Rich when I'd had Olivia narrate the books at a different studio, and they didn't know how to edit the audio at all, and it was recorded better than it was edited, and the editing, they used software that just chopped the end of sentences off. And it was embarrassing, and it was an absolute mess, and I got completely scammed. And it's why I'm doing the writers course anyway, is to try and help new writers like me who decide to go alone, how not to get scammed, or if you go with a publisher who does self-publish authors, how not to get scammed by them. And then I dropped a big problem onto his lap, gave him 3 books and said, can you make something out of them so that we could still use the original recordings? And he did an amazing job, and it was great. So
that one's memorable because for me, in a way, what that did is that then challenges me as a producer, as an editor, and to look at something and go, well, how can we do this? So I think for your books, it was challenging because I had to work out how we were going to do it, not knowing whether I'd get the original masters, which was quite difficult. You know, if you haven't got those to work with, we still could have worked with the files that you'd already had. But we did everything in reverse with your book, which was unique in a way. So what we did is the first thing we did is we got it in, then we proofed it. So then we proofed it and found out where the issues were, and then kind of reverse engineered it in a way. So that was kind of memorable in that way, and that's a kind of a positive in a way because it does show that, you know, listening to, when you do a project, it's so important to listen to it before it goes out to market, because, you know, so many people will be disappointed. Obviously there's the author, even the people that are involved in the production to a degree, they've got to have a certain amount of responsibility for what they're putting out there. You know, we're not all perfect, everybody makes mistakes, and with audiobooks, it being what we call long form audio, you know, you're talking something like 10 hours of audio. It's a lot of concentration, and errors do slip through. But we do try and obviously put all of the sort of catches in there, the steps that will catch those errors as it goes through. But inevitably, you know, it has happened with us. We've been, touch wood, we've been very fortunate, but it does happen.
You get it in print with massive publishers who have a team of expert editors, and then I'll read through and there's a bad spelling error there. How did that go through all that quality control and stuff? So, you know, it happens. Humans make mistakes, so does AI. So it happens on both sides. What is the one thing you wish you had known when starting out in audiobook production?
Wow. As a company, how tight-lipped everybody else could be. And that
Did
sounds...
you get that in the audio? No, because I got that in the publishing world. No one will tell you anything.
No.
It's like, well, I'll give you a little bit, so it looks like I am.
Well, this goes back. Wow. Yeah, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier. So it was great. Me set up the company. I had contacts who were, on the whole, narrators. But the difficulty I then had was to forge the relationships with the publishers and convince the publishers that I was good enough for them to use. You know, and so, you know, they're talking about big productions, big books that they're pushing out, you know, and at that time they were very kind of they had their little niches, they had their little studios that they were using in London. It was very London centric. It still is to a degree. So the difficulty we had was proving to them that we could do that job, and so, you know, working hard to do that. The difficulty then was, how much do we charge for this, and, you know, what's the going rate on this, and everybody was kind of like that, and it was, so you're kind of feeling around for quite a bit, and it's still the same, unfortunately. So, you know, but I wish I'd have had more of an insight into how much I should be sort of selling myself for, how much, you know, and the company, how much should we be making. And it's a big thing when in business, you know, even now, you know, we do courses. We're part of a mentorship group, you know, because things just change all the time. So it's definitely the business side. I wish I'd have been a little bit more skilled in business, but I think a good way to learn is to make the mistakes sometimes. And I think you learn from making the mistakes, and we've made plenty of those, you know, as every business has. But we generally learn from them. But I wish that was it's more to do with the business side than it actually was to do with the. I've got belief in myself. I can do the job, but it's then, you know, how does the business work? You know, do we go limited company? Do we stay as
you kind of learn so much?
It's a big learning curve, and to do that as well as trying to stay on top of the work. That was a learning curve. But I'm still learning. You know, we're all learning. My wife's still learning. I'm still learning. There are things that we're picking up constantly. You know, we can do that better. We'll look at the end of the year and say, well, maybe we should have done that. Okay, well, we'll do that. And the audiobook industry, so, you know, it's really funny with the major publishers. It varies year on year as well, because I think a lot of it depends on budgets, on what they're pushing out and what they're not. So it kind of fluctuates what you get in from. I can't say that next February will be the same as this February has been. So there are all those kind of things to navigate as well. So I think the business side was definitely something that I wish I'd have had, maybe learnt more about or looked at, because when you set something up, when you know, we're all excited and we're going to set up a company and we're going to do this, but invariably there's always something that you kind of overlook. And I think so you've got to be I think be prepared to learn.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm going through that, and on my coaching course we talk about how failure is just an opportunity to learn something different.
Absolutely.
It is not the word failure is it's put there to make people give up. But actually, every successful person could not have become successful unless they'd failed a few times.
I think you've got to.
You have to.
I think that's the case. You know, and we've done that. You know, I've done that in the way I edit or the way we edit. You know, crumbs when we first started, and I was on my own. I was pulling some really, really long days editing, and we had so much work on, and I was like, whoa. So that was quite difficult, but you know, you learn from that. You know, you get to the point where you think, I can't keep doing this by myself. I've got to start pushing this. We've either got to start taking people on, or we've got to start pushing it out. And you know, I can go down loads of other areas of conversation here with like being a small business, and it's not easy. It's not easy, and there's, you know, it's very difficult for us being small. You know, you take people on, then you've got the responsibility of pensions and it goes down that route. So the model that we use with freelancers kind of suits us really kind of well as a small company.
Yeah, it works well because then you're not committed and you can.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've still got the same, being a limited company, we've still got the same issues that any other limited company has got. You know, but I think it's how it's how you do it. That was something that we struggled with, I think, as well, was working out, well, do we want to be employing people, or are we happy to use this? And I think this is one of those industries where even if you look at film, you look at television production, you look at even radio production now, it's all freelance. You know, production companies will hire in catering companies, they will hire in external sound editors, they will hire in other sort of producers, you know, so it all works on that kind of freelance model, really. And I think that's the same for the whole of the media.
I think you're right, because that's what surprised me. Was the publishing company I was working with, it's all they don't have staff, it's all freelancers. They have skeleton staff at best. And I just thought, well, I'm a project manager. I can pull a team together and cut out the middleman. Well, what am I paying all that extra money for? It's ridiculous. I have the skills to at least achieve that. So I think you're right. And in your opinion, what does the future hold for the audiobook industry, and how is your studio preparing for it?
Well, I mean, we're just making the changes. I think for us, we prepare for the future by look at it as part of my job is I've got to stay in touch with what's happening technologically with recording. So I'm a bit of a geek when it comes to audio stuff and stuff. You know, I've got to keep my eye on what's happening. Will that make our life easier? Will that make my job quicker, better? So we're always preparing, if you like, for tomorrow. There's no, I think we've just got to keep ploughing forward. What does the future bring? I don't know. With audiobooks, it's really funny because I can remember many years ago when we started to do MP3s, having a conversation with some of my colleagues and saying, wow, you know, where's this going? Because we've gone from cassettes, which when I first started, we were producing audiobooks on cassettes.
I remember having to turn them out.
And for editing, it was a pain. But anyway, so 20 hours of audiobook on cassettes was hard to sort of, you know, to do. Anyway, so we had that, and then we had the CDs, and then the MP3s came in, and I remember having this conversation with my colleagues, and we were all out having a drink one night. I said, what's the future? You know, where's it going to go now? Where will it be in 30 years? And it's really interesting because, you know, where will it? Because we have gone from a stage now where even libraries are university libraries, for example. They haven't got the books or the doctorates now, where students write doctorates, are not kept in bound paper form anymore. They're online. Okay, so they've got to store those. Now, in 10 years' time, what will be the software to be able to access that document? You know, you remember WordPerfect and things like that. So these things change. So it will be the same with, I've no doubt it will be the same with audio technology, the way files are consumed, whether in with MP3, what we do with MP3 from a technical point of view is what MP3s do is they strip out all of the noise in the audio that the human ear cannot hear, basically. So it takes out all these elements, and then that's what decreases the file size, right? But it depending on how much you take out depends on the quality of the audio that you're getting at the end. So, you know, my thoughts are, well, what's going to be next? You know, what file types are we going to have in the future? Where, because MP3 actually, I'm pretty sure that the people that created the MP3 are not taking it any further. They're not doing anything else with it.
No, so there's got to be conversion tools, and there's got to be storage.
Yeah, exactly.
Options.
So in the future, I mean, we've got for my studio, I did another interesting project. Actually, talking about projects that stand out. Somebody came to me with a shoebox of cassettes, nothing to do with audiobooks, but it was an interesting project. And she came to me with 2 or 3 shoeboxes. She said, I've got these cassettes. It's my family history that I started to record in the late 1960s, through the 70s, through the 80s. And so I had all these cassettes, and I'm thinking, gosh. So then I obviously need something to play that back. So as studios, I think a good studio is a studio. I've got an really old tape-to-tape machine around there. If you've got the equipment that we can play back that thing, that we can digitize it with, okay, that's going to be a big issue in the future. I think for us is you know, what are the playback systems going to be? How do we of the thousands of hundreds of audiobooks, should I say, that we've got stored? You know, a publisher may come to me in 5 or 6 years and say, Richard, you've still got the masters for that, because their rights might have run out, but they might still want to use the original audio, but they might want to rebadge it. So they might want to take the fronts off. They might have sold the audio rights, but they've sold the recording with it. So instead of going through the, you know, why bother going through the cost of recording this again when we've got a perfectly good copy there? Let's take the masters back in. So those are the changes I think we have to look at and stay on top of. So I think that for me is what I'm constantly kind of looking ahead. In how we're going to be recording in 3 or 4 years, and it is moving really quickly, the technology now. And B, how do we store it? You know, and how are we going to play it back in 10 years? Those are the changes I think that are relative to sort of more relevant to us.
And this leads nicely actually into, so on my course I'm talking about the future of audio and how I do believe self-publishing is the way of the future. From everything I see, I think the game is up for traditional publishing. People are just, I know really good traditional published writers, and it supplements their pensions. Even if they do 2 books a year for 30 years. That is ridiculous. That is insane. So I just think more and more authors will do their own. You've already said that publishers are getting the authors to do their own, to save money on hiring narrators and things like that. So that seems to be happening more.
Yeah.
And I was going to ask you questions anyway, and this is what I started with. I'm really excited that Rich is doing a course on how to edit your own audiobooks if you're narrating them and things like that. And I think that's awesome. So tell me, I know that you've got a book coming out next month in July.
Yeah.
Audiobook editing for narrators.
Yeah.
So keep your eye out on Amazon for that, because that's going to be a good one. And I'm really keen on that because my daughter's narrating my books, but then I'm going to narrate my own standalone books after that. And when we do our Orient Express journal, we're going to narrate our own chapters each on it. I think this personal touch, which AI can never trespass on, is going to be really lovely. And what people fall in love with, I believe, from me anyway, from my point of view. And then Audiobook Editing 101 is your course that's coming out the end of July. Tell me a little bit about that.
Okay, so Audiobook Editing 101 it'll be on a platform called thinkific.com, which is online. And the whole idea with this really was, from my own personal experience, exactly the same as you. How are people going to learn to do this job? It's hard enough getting a foot into the industry anyway. Generally, you can only get a foot in the industry if you've got the experience. So it's very much chicken and egg. Okay, and I think with a lot of these jobs, it's very much. And for me, it's giving a little bit of something back, because it is nice to give back something. I'm not wildly successful, but I'm making a living from this, and I think there are other people out there that want to do it. There are plenty of media courses out there, but I don't think there are many that are specific to audiobooks. Okay, there are plenty of courses out there in audio production, without a doubt. But as we and you have known from experience, a recording studio is not just a recording studio.
Yeah, it's not as easy as you think.
It's not as easy as you think. There will be, studios that concentrate on music. And there will be studios like us that are primarily spoken word, whether that be audiobook, podcast, voiceover, whatever. So I thought it'd be nice to do a book and take people through from really, really basic. This is, a set of headphones. This is an audio interface, and take them through it. And so the idea is that we're going to run this course. People can download the lessons. There's also a Facebook group called Audiobook Editing 101, and there'll also be a private group for those that buy the course. There'll also be like a sort of a peer review, if you like. People can talk, we can all talk to each other, and I think creating this nice kind of community. And so the idea is to teach people to edit, not just using the technology, but I also have some tips and tricks in there about actually doing it properly, getting into a waveform and looking at it, and this is what you need to know. Real geeky stuff, but it's important to know. The other reason I've done this is because I have gone on to Facebook groups such as Audible ACX and seen some of the kind of comments on there from people that are trying to break into the industry, and holding my head and thinking, gosh, this there's nobody there to hold the hand, really. There's plenty of information on there, and there's plenty of people that will sit up and say, you need to do this, which might be completely different from the other person's. No, they don't. You need to do this. And it's like, gosh, because everybody's experiences are different. Yeah. So my idea really was to have an online course. And the other good thing about this is we're trying to look at getting 12 small audiobook recordings that we're going to have that people can download, and they will be unedited, and they will come with an edit script. So for all intents and purposes, if they're an editor sitting at home and they're working for a publisher, it's going to be exactly the same kind of routine. Okay, there's the audio, there's the edit script to work from. Go ahead and edit it.
Nice.
And so we're going to, hopefully, they won't be very long books, probably an hour. They will be books that are out of copyright, so it'll be something that we bring down offline. But we're going to get a professional narrator to come in and narrate those books, but leave the mistakes in.
Nice.
Okay, and so that will give the person that's learning to edit, that will give them hopefully a taste and give them the confidence to work through the books. And it will be a course that once we've done it, they can download all the materials, they can keep it forever. There's no limit There's no limit on it. And they'll learn actually on the job, as it were, so they can be doing the work and learning. And then the Facebook group and the group that will be attached to thinkific.com for that particular course, you know, I'll be there to answer any questions that they have or don't have, or anything where they're pulling their hair out. So hopefully we can.
I should be
help
shouting
them.
when I've purchased it. It's available.
Yeah, well,
So
that is on pre-sale now.
So go to, what is it?
Thinkific.com.
Go and have a pre-sale. I'm going to pre-order it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's Audiobook Editing 101.
Yeah.
The other book I'm writing is called Audiobook Editing for Narrators. The idea for this came a long time ago, basically in lockdown, because we had to pivot really, really quickly. The whole industry had to pivot really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And so over the years, there are two models to audiobook recording. There's the US model and there's the UK model, right? So they're very different sort of ways of doing it. Now in the US, actors and narrators have been working from home forever. You know, they've been home recording for quite a long time. They've got very good home studios. That was the model that has gone in the US. The UK, not so much. It's generally actors that use studios like ourselves. But there were still narrators that had got their home studios. So come lockdown, it was pretty obvious that the ones that were going to stay employed at that point were the ones that had got the home studio setups. So there were a lot of narrators out there on a limb. How do we do? Well, what are we going to do? You know, this is our, and in a way the same for us. Although we knew we could work down the line, we've done this. We've worked across the internet before, recording audiobooks down.
Yeah, you used to tapes. You could do anything, Richard.
Well, so nice of you to say, but there's still a struggle. There is still a struggle. You know, how do you do it? What techniques are we going to use? Because we still had loads of books to get out, but you know, how are we going to do this? You know, we've got to do it down. We're going to do it down the line. Some of the narrators were quite confident to work by themselves and do a lot of it at home. Some of them really hadn't. So those ones we just said, we taught them literally. I did stuff online then. You know, I was doing these little courses and sending them to. This is what you need to do. Download Audacity because that was free. But you're going to have to buy your microphone, you're going to have to buy a set of headphones, you're going to have to buy an audio interface. So it was great because it was a challenge, and from that respect, it was you know, how do we do this? So it came out of that really, because editing is it's so subjective in time, but you want your book to sound good. However it's edited, you want it to sound decent.
I think you doing this course is my dream come true. It's brilliant because I've struggled as a single mum to pay for all these things. A lot of writers who self-publish, they don't do the audiobooks. Yeah. And then from my point of view, that's leaving. In IT, I work with a lot of guys who have special needs somewhere.
Yeah.
My children go to school with someone with special needs somewhere on the spectrum.
Yeah.
And they need audiobooks. And then we can't afford to do them because we can't compete with the big publishers. So I think that is genius. And this is what I love seeing at the moment is the world is changing. And you have people like yourself, like me, and your words, you want to give back. Yeah. You want to teach people what you wish you had been given helped with. And that's brilliant. I love it. Yeah,
I mean the fact, just actually going into a studio and recording it, but the first time I ever did it, I can remember now, and it was a eureka moment. It was like kind of sitting there thinking, wow. You know, I'm so used to going in, putting the guitar down, recording, 23 tracks, 24 tracks on the screen, and now I'm recording one track. But I tell you what, that one track was a damn sight harder to record than a band. And I don't say that lightly, but to capture a voice, to capture a performance, making sure there's no extraneous noise, you know, you've got this really nice, and then of course the editing on top. There's a lot of work that goes into this.
It surprised me. Well, I'm quite tech savvy, and I was still like, flipping heck, there's a lot in that.
But the thing is as well, you see, it's not just the recording, it's when people do their own audio, when they record their own audiobooks, the biggest problem they're going to find is when they get to the end and they have to master the audio to be specific to what that platform requires.
Especially ACX, because
so ACX,
all over YouTube, the problems with that.
ACX are very, you know, it has to be mastered to, you know, between 14 and minus 24 for what they call RMS. the peak levels have to be at -3 dB. So that these technicalities, when somebody's looking at it, first will go, oh wow. So the course will hopefully kind of
Simplify.
open up that.
Yeah.
But the way we're going to teach, the way I want to teach editing is there are two ways to record an audiobook. So there are two methods that are generally used. One is called punch and roll, which is where as they're recording, if they make a mistake, the narrator is recording themselves, they can stop, and the recording will jump back 3 seconds. They press record again and carry on. Now that's all very well, and a lot of people say, oh, well, there's no edits in that at the end. It's all finished because there are no mistakes because you've taken them out as you go. No, that's not the case, because you've got to go in, you've got to tidy it up, you've got to sort of tidy those gaps up. There might be little bits of audio left over, so you still have to go back in. So what we do is we use a thing called fluff and repeat. So fluff and repeat. So if you make an error, you carry on, because with digital audio, you can see where the mistakes are. Now, what we have to do then is we have to somehow mark the audio where those errors are, as well as marking our script. But there's a unique way that we use, which makes that just as quick as punch and roll. And what I found is, looking at a lot of these sites, especially on ACX, a lot of the ACX websites, people struggle with punch and roll, because it's how do you set it up, and it gets frustrating. The other thing I believe about punch and roll, and this is just my own personal experience as a producer and editor, is that it actually takes a little bit away from the performance, because you're constantly stopping, going back, punching and starting again. If you're just recording, and you're just recording, you can just stop. Take yourself back to the start of the chapter again and move. You haven't got to think about anything else other than your narration. If you're actually having to do the technical thing of stop, it's so the way we are trying to push on this course is, there's one button. If you make a mistake, you just go like that and do it again. And believe me, by the time you get to it, the end of it, we've developed a way of by the course you'll see. But it is a quicker way of doing it. Yeah.
Oh, I can't wait! I'm so excited to do it. Do you know? I just honestly didn't know you were doing that course until
it's only been over the last year. Been busy doing that the last couple of months, really. So on top of it, it's finding the time.
Oh, thank you.
To do those things, And
yeah,
but
the time is hard.
Yeah, it is,
because we've got to earn our crust as well, and it's like, I'm trying to fit these interviews and my course content in on top of everything else, and
I know
it's really hard to achieve.
It is.
So don't give up on the course. I love it. No. Right, thank you so much for that. So audiobook editing 101, end of July. Perfect. Narrators. Are the narrators professional voice actors, and do they have experience with narrating multiple audiobook genres, or do they focus on specific areas?
Good question. I think the more experienced an audiobook narrator becomes, the more tempted they are to try different genres.
So they do branch out.
They do branch out. There is one narrator that I work with quite a bit, a guy called Peter Kenny, who is he loves his sci-fi. He does a lot of Ian Banks's books. And he loves sci-fi. But, you can also find him reading John Lennon's biography, or, so he does but he likes sci-fi. He'll look for, if he, I think he might use ACX, I'm not sure, sorry Peter, I'm not sure if he does, I think he does. But generally he's well employed by a lot of publishers, so he does vary. But the majority, as a producer, I tend to know what narrator will be good for what particular type of book. So there are narrators who I think get frustrated in a way, because they get kind of penned in to a certain genre, and I know plenty of that, and they get frustrated because they want to break out of that, they want to do other books. So because in a way it kind of restricts their output, because if people only think, they only do Mills and Boon's type novel, but they want to do a real good crime novel, they kind of price themselves out. So I think a lot of narrators do really try to cover all bases, definitely.
I get that.
But they'll have the favourites.
On my projects, you get pigeonholed into one technology, and you're there going, well, actually, I can do all the different technology. Yeah, but I want one that you've done recently.
Well, in a way, you kind of make a rod for your own back.
You do.
If you become really good at something, you kind of. So it is. It's that sort of, well, you know, you've got to be. It's how you play it and sort of market yourself, I suppose.
I didn't know that actually. So it's good. It's interesting that they face that similar. I can identify with what they're going through.
Yeah.
So you could probably help advise any self-published authors who come to you with who they might be able to try or go to.
Oh, definitely. I mean, yeah. When you know, self-publishing authors have come to us and they don't want to do the book themselves, they will ask us, and I can point them down the right. That will change. Obviously, cost will come into it as well. So you know, the more experienced narrators you get, who might be, their name might be out there on hundreds and hundreds of books, and they might charge you a little bit more. But yeah, that's gonna make a difference with that, I suppose. But generally, we can advise, and I do advise on you know, who I think would be suitable for a particular book. Yeah. And we get that from, you know, some publishers, they'll give us the book with the narrator in mind if the author's not doing it. Some publishers will ask me to provide 2 or 3 auditions, so then I might have to get in touch with the narrator or their agent and say, look, can you give us an audition for this? So yeah, it really changes from book to book and publisher to publisher as well. They've all got their own sort of different methods that they sort of operate on. Yeah. Okie
dokie. So you've already mentioned that you had a young lady publish a book and you gave her some voice coaching. So could you just briefly explain what sort of coaching support you might give an author who is narrating their own book for the first time, and if there's any tips on how they can self-narrate or any free learning videos or tools where they can learn, what would you suggest?
There are plenty of online, some great stuff on YouTube, there really is. And don't just look for audiobooks, look for voiceover as well. There are lots of guys that are talking about voiceovers, because at the end of the day it's the same job. You know, with an audiobook it's a little bit more involved. They're longer sessions than voiceover, yes, but in general, mic technique and the way, you know, you use the microphone, very basic things. What I tend to do when we have an author that come in that has never touched this kind of thing before, I generally take them into the booth. I'll sit with them for 5 or 10 minutes and say, you know, this is what I want you to do. You know, you've got to be on mic. Don't kind of move your head away. Don't sit back too far, because obviously if you sit back from a microphone, what you're doing is you're introducing more of the room into it as well, because your voice is then starting to bounce off a little more off any surfaces. I mean, in the booth it's kind of compacted anyway, so we've got it all sort of padded out. But if some people haven't got those facilities at home, so you know, they might be in their living room. So what do? Well, put coats up, put quilts up, anything to deaden the sound, reflective surfaces. But generally, yeah, when an author comes into, I will spend time, tell them what I want for them in front of the microphone, what to do, what not to do. People tend to do this, you know, in front of the mic, or they'll scratch the guys, rub the beards, and
it's really loud.
Yeah, well, you know, you've got to remember that you're in an isolated room with a microphone. Yeah. That microphone picks up everything. Yeah. Okay, tummy rumbles and.
Well, we learned that when Livy was narrating. She kept getting this gurgling in the throat, or the belly rumbling when she was hungry. It was so loud, wasn't it?
And I think the more you talk, because you're talking for hours at a time, I think it just starts to get the diaphragm moving, and all these things start happening. With the microphones are really sensitive, so they'll pick it up. So there's a lot of technique there in how we use the microphone. Obviously, if there are loud passages as well, you want to kind of drop back off the mic a little bit if you're going to be louder, but not so far that you're bringing the room in as well. But that's my job this side of the glass then, to say, okay, I'm picking a bit of the room up there, can you just pull in on mic a little bit there, or that needs to be a little bit more intimate. So with a lot of the authors, it's actually kind of learning on the job. You know, unfortunately, I've actually made a video that I'm starting to send to publishers now as well. Oh, so if they say this is an author read, I'll send them a link and say, well, can they look at this prior to us kind of.
Would you mind sharing that?
No, not at all.
If you do that would be great. Yeah. And I'll put all the links to his book, his course, and that video. Yeah. I'll put everything under this wherever I publish it, whatever platform I put it onto, because that would be helpful. Yeah. And I never thought about that, looking for voiceover training I only thought of looking at audiobook training. Duh, makes sense.
It's the same. It's
So
the
thank
same.
you.
It's the same. Yeah, it's the same discipline at the end of the day. In terms of, like I say, in terms of technique and what to do in front of the mic. The difference is obviously with audiobooks, they're longer sessions, and breathing is probably a little bit different, obviously, because you've got to think about sentence length, sentence construction. This all comes from the preparation. So when you're as a narrator, even if you're the author, go back through your book. I have worked with authors who have actually come in and gone, wow. And then I'll say to them, have you ever read that out loud? It's funny because I actually say this to I have a little conversation with authors, and a question I often ask is, do you read out when you write? And some of them will say no.
Do. Yeah.
Some do.
Hardly.
Some do, but the majority don't.
And you certainly don't read the whole book out loud. You might read a part of it, but I think it's really important to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when you read something out loud, it's so different to reading it up there. Because sometimes you will skip words up here that you're getting the gist of what you're doing. Yeah. But when you read an audiobook, it's word for word.
Yeah.
We do allow some things like, instead of saying they are, if you want to shorten it to there, or it's all these sort of contractions or expansion, whatever, that comes into play at times, as long as the sentence. But again, that is dependent on the publisher.
Yeah, and she was given voice coaching training, and they had to walk and talk with your mouth like this, and it actually makes it a lot clearer.
Yeah.
But she captures all my errors when she reads out loud for the audiobook. So what I've said to her now is I'm not publishing it in text until she's read the audiobook, because even with copy editors and all the other editors that cost a bomb, she finds it
really interesting point that I have had this discussion with authors, particularly over the last. This is one change that I haven't seen it happen, but again, it's a bit of a chicken and egg thing here, because I actually think recording the audiobook is a fantastic way to proof your book. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I've learned that.
Proofreading it, because when it's being prepared, when the narrator prepares for, they might miss something. So when it comes to reading it out loud, and I've often said, sometimes I think that this part of the process of publishing, audiobooks are huge now, and publishers surprisingly are putting a lot into it, but maybe not as much, I think, as they should. I think there are some areas that it could improve, but who am I to tell big publishers that have been around for years and years and years? But I think sometimes there is an argument for doing an audiobook in the very early stages of production. Now, the argument there would be, well, you might only be on version 1 of the script, and there might be 5 versions of the script.
It's finding that balance, isn't it?
It's finding that balance, but also if the book is pretty much there, and when we talk, you don't want to sound like a robot. Sometimes things are going to be said differently. You're going to shorten words, or you want it to sound natural, unless there's anything massively different. If there's anything massively different, then they can come back in and we can do a drop in. Later on in the time. But the majority of the book is being proofed as you go. So I think there's an argument there for doing it right at the start of the whole production process. And I think as a self-publishing author, if you've got audiobooks in mind, and that's the way you're definitely going to go, that is what I would suggest doing.
I'd agree with you.
Do the book, but before it's almost like pre-selling, isn't it?
Yes.
Right. So when you pre-sell your course, so I've learned this from doing my course. They'll all tell you, put the book out there first to see if it gathers momentum. Well, it's the same with the recording. If you do the recording first, you find the errors.
Yeah.
And it's nothing that's insurmountable, because you can come back and you can redo it. It's the beauty with audio, you can do it again.
And it's the same with self-publishing, you can do it again easy, but not in other ways, because you can't, you have to pay again and things like that.
Yeah.
But I totally agree with you, because my first book in the series, for example, was heavily over-edited. Now, I'm a really good editor. I've been doing technical document editing for over 30 years. I'm a really good editor, but it's very hard to edit your own work. And one thing I don't cut down on is the copy editor. So a copy editor is the most expensive editor, and that's £1,200 to £1,600 for an average book, paperback book. And that cost me a lot. But then I will have 3, 4, 5 different people edit it, including my and in addition, to myself and my 2 children. And my daughter, she picks out things the copy editor misses. And she'll argue with the copy editor. So it's incredible. So if you find someone who's good at editing, you use them. But honestly, even having paid all that, and I went for a really good publisher who had really good editors in-house, and they all sanity checked and quality controlled it, and she still found loads reading it out loud. It was incredible.
It happens, and I mean, you know, I've got a book coming up where, in fact, I've got a book next week and I haven't got the final version of the script. You know, this is from a publisher, so we're going to have to go with what we've got. So that can be difficult because by the end of it, if it's sent out for proof, we use our own proofers. We've got our own proofers that we use, but occasionally the publisher might QC it as well.
Yeah.
So they'll proof it a second time, which is fine, you know. And if it comes back with any errors, you know, I have to explain for a second time that, well, we didn't have that in the script that we had, and so there are all these little areas that maybe could be tidied up. But I think there is a lot. I think there's a lot to say for certainly doing the audiobook at the start. Yeah. And if you're a self-publisher, and if you are a self-publisher, I would highly recommend that. Obviously, if you're going to do the book, I mean, obviously we have to think about cost, and I appreciate that. And sometimes, you know, if a book does well, then somebody will say, okay, well, what about? So some people might go about it the other way, purely out of terms of cost, where it's easier for them to do the book first. If it sells and then it generates enough interest, and then they think, okay, well, this is worth doing an audio, then I get that. But hopefully the book has been out there long enough anyway, where if there are any mistakes, hopefully they've been brought to your attention.
Yeah, or you just re-upload your book if you're in control of your own work. Easy. Found another one, re-upload it. And also reread that chapter or part of that chapter and then re-upload it. If you're in control, it's easy.
Yeah.
I would put in there, debate another side of this though, that I think it's a totally different market. So if your paperback sells well or doesn't sell well, doesn't mean the audio will or won't, because it's different people who are going to pick that up.
I totally agree with that, and I think because
how do you know?
Yeah, because audio is, you know, everybody's busy now, and so people say audiobooks are a bad thing because people aren't reading. Well, I don't believe that.
I've got the opposite now. You know, everyone's saying I only get to read now if I'm listening to it while I do housework or commute.
We've all got really busy lives, and I think that is also the what's helped the audiobooks become so popular. You know, people can just plug in, they can come out of the office, put the book in and stay. You know, they might have been on a computer reading all day. You know, they don't want to be reading when they're on their way home. They might just want to put their earphones in. I think that's the beauty of audiobooks.
I'm with you on that. And we've covered some of these questions, so we're nearly there. Haven't we? Actually, but I just think it's been a really fascinating interview. This is amazing. Rights and distribution. Do you? I know you assist with the distribution of completed audiobooks such as Audible, ACX and Faraway Voices, because you've done that and helped out with me. But do you have any advice on how to maximise the reach of an audiobook and any other ways that authors can effectively distribute and market their audiobooks with your knowledge on the industry at the moment?
It's very difficult for us because the bulk of the work I do is... You know, we're employed by the publisher to do the work, so they take care of most of that side. When people do come to me that are self-publishing, you know, it's a service that I can advise, but I'm not going to sit here and say, "Oh, this is how you should do it," because I really don't know enough about us. Marketing. What I would advise, I think, is use. I would actually say, don't spread yourself too wide. And I'm saying this from experience of doing my own things with music, to be honest. It's a little bit different, I know, but I think with all things digital and with all things out in the ether, I think the wider you spread yourself, i.e. have it on that platform, have it on that platform, have it on that platform, market it on that platform, the more you've got to take care of, the more. So I think narrow down on, find out, do your research on what is a good. TikTok is really good for promoting at the moment. I would say TikTok
is really good on TikTok, better than the others. TikTok and Instagram.
Instagram.
They seem to be the two main ones.
I don't think Twitter is a place for selling. Okay, Twitter is a place for moaning, from what I can see. But which I'll just stay off there. But yeah, definitely don't spread yourself too wide. Just put a couple of samples out there. You know, I mean, there's nothing wrong with putting something out. Just 30 seconds. Nobody's going to rip you off, or you know. And ultimately, whatever you feel about audiobooks, whatever you feel about safety and being ripped off, I'll tell you a little story, and this is true. This happened, right? So, I'm going to go back to Dom and Tom Holland here, because obviously Tom, being as big as he is, everybody wanted a bit of it, okay? And people will look for his stuff, okay? Dom was very concerned about safety, digital rights management, because he was doing it himself. I don't want to be ripped off. I don't want people to be able to download this. So it's the only time we've ever done this, but we pointed him in the direction of a platform that we thought he could use to do it himself, right? Other than Findaway, other than ACX, okay? So he did it all by himself. He found a platform. Within 2 hours of that book going live, even though the only way you could access that book was to buy it and use it through a proprietary, like Audible, it was exactly the same as Audible. You had to have the player on your phone, okay? It's the only way you could play it. You couldn't download it any other way. It would only play through that player, right? Within 2 hours of that book going live, somebody had played it back through a very high quality sound system, recorded it onto a microphone and put it up onto YouTube within 2 hours.
Oh my God.
The problem we had then was we had
What is wrong with that person?
Well, yeah, I mean, we questioned it, and they said, well, you know, it's not the whole audiobook, but actually it was the whole of Tom's involvement in that audiobook, because Tom did the foreword, and there were conversations at the end that they put in at the end of the book with Dom. So in fact, Tom's YouTube said we can't do anything about it because it's not the book in its entirety, so nothing's being breached. Our argument was, well, actually, it is all of Tom's work, because Tom only did that bit. So it was quite frustrating, really. That's because really I'd actually said to Dom, you know, you're going to be okay here. You know, look, we're all old enough, or I'm certainly old enough to remember sitting in front of the top 10 in the 1970s with a little cassette player, right? And recording the song. I used to get really irritated with the DJs. No, you'd miss half the song at the start and half the song at the end. So you only get the bit in the middle. So look, I'm going to say, look, we all know it goes on, but I think, again, as we've mentioned, the genie's out of the bag, as it were. And so I think people sometimes feel that it's okay to put people's work up, irregardless of getting their permission, and throwing it out there, not really realising it's cost people money. It's costing people a lot of money. And people are losing money.
It is theft.
It is theft.
It is absolute theft.
So there are those things. We've kind of gone off topic a little bit there, but I think
it's useful to know.
I think it's important that to remember that you whatever we do, we're never 100% secure in what we put out in terms of safety. And in terms of not getting ripped off, there will always be somebody that...
Well, that's why they go around cinemas, to stop people recording it, because they can actually get good quality from some cameras and then put it out there. Yeah. And it's the same, even if you just go on ACX, which have very secure platforms, there's nothing stopping anyone from recording it and then putting that anywhere else. Yeah. I bought a book that I thought was legit, an audiobook, and as I started to listen to it, I started to hear different sounds. I'm like, that's been copied. Yeah. And then somebody just sold it to me. Yeah. And then I was like, oh my, and then I realised that it wasn't a legit copy at all, but it wasn't clear to me. And I was just like, oh my goodness. Yeah. And I felt really bad because that was an actor I really liked, hence why I bought his audiobook. Okay, so is there any other advice, apart from all this wonderful advice, that you would give to authors or narrators who are new to the audiobook production process?
Okay, yeah. It's very difficult. It's a very costly thing to get involved in, really, and it can be cost. I mean, you know that it costs. If we can do it from home, do it well. That's what I'm going to say, because yes, people. I think during lockdown, people came a little bit more understanding of quality. You know, because even the biggest studios were quite aware this is the only way they're going to get material pushed out. So I think the consumer became a little bit more understanding of that and a little less picky. But really, have a look through Audible and just have a look. Just have. I tend not to do it anymore for my own sanity, but have a look through Audible and have a look at the reviews. Be careful with Audible because sometimes it might just be the book review as opposed to the audiobook review. So make sure that the reviews you're looking at are about the audiobooks. But generally have a look through there because you can learn an awful lot from what people expect from an audiobook in terms of quality, in terms of, you know, I mean, and some of it is so subjective. I've actually seen things on, you know, I don't like books read by this narrator. Well, obviously the first question is, why buy them?
Why buy?
But they do.
Why buy two?
Yeah. So you have to take it with a pinch of salt. But you know, by doing a little bit of research, really, and finding out, because if you do want to do it yourself, you can do it. Okay, there are professional narrators that are working from home now that have been narrating. The thing that they had to work out was, how do I record? This is what I'm trying to plug the gap on with my books, you know, trying to help people achieve that. Some people will look at me and go, well, Rich, you know, you've got a studio, aren't you doing yourself out of work? I don't believe I am, because I think there's that much material out there. There's enough for everybody, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think this is what everyone has to understand. We do that in our spiritual work, in our writing, in poetry. There's enough for everyone.
There's enough for everybody, and you know, I think, you know, and touch wood, that's how it will happen. I've got, you know, I do have a thing with quality. I think if you're going to do something, do it to the best of your ability. I think people sometimes wrongly assume that reading a book is easy behind a microphone, right? It's not, right? Sitting behind a microphone for even 1 hour and to read is tiring, even for narrators. You know, there are some professional narrators.
We were shocked how tiring it was. First thing Livy said was that it's a lot more tiring than I thought it would be.
It's mentally it's demanding, okay? And so this is why errors do creep in, because we're all human, and sometimes your ears are fantastic little beasts and things on the side of your head, but sometimes they'll hear things that you don't really hear. All right, so I might mark something down on the script and go, well, there's a noise there, and then I listen to it during the edit and go, why did I mark that? Because I didn't hear anything. Or conversely, the other way, I might think, how on earth did I let the narrator say that? You know, and such an obvious error, but I let him or her say it because, you know, because I'm produced, I'm looking at the screen, I'm marking the script. It's very.
It's hard to multitask.
You've got to do all these things, but you're doing it for hours at a time. Yeah. So invariably mistakes happen. So the advice I've got is, if you're starting it off, don't pin yourself to a microphone for an hour at a time if you can't. If it doesn't work, do 20 minutes here or there, but make sure the sound is consistent. Make sure you're exactly the same position behind the mic every time you hit the mic. Make sure the room is the same. Okay, if you're gonna, what I would say is, a lot of people say, oh well, you know, I'll put a quilt up. Don't put the quilt up and then take it down and then put it up the next day, because I can guarantee it's going to sound different. Yeah. You know, even in our booth, recording some day to day can sound a little bit different, and the way we get around this in post and in edit is using pieces of equipment called compressors, and these are all bits of equipment that you really do need to know about. And this is what I will cover in the book, but it gives you nice even performance at the end of it, and so on and so forth. So really learn the basics that you really, but do as good a job as you can. There is plenty of other information out there, as well as my courses. There are other tutorials online. I think ACX have got the ACX University, you know, so that is worth looking at as well. But just do a good job. I think sometimes sometimes I listen to audio and I think, God, we spend so much money on getting our books to sound really superb, you know, and really high quality, and they do, and yet sometimes I can go online and listen to something that sounds like it's been recorded in a bathroom, and that sounds awful.
No, I've heard that. I've wondered how is that up there.
Well, but the other thing you've got to remember is there are, so you're saying about how do you get quality of audiobooks. So for example, and I'm going to go off topic a little bit here, but it's a little bit geeky. most audiobooks, when we finalise them, they're finalised in MP3. Okay, platforms like Audible originally, well, they've got their own file type. They've got their own proprietary file type. So what used to happen is we would compress the file to MP3 to deliver to the client. The client would then upload to Audible, and then Audible would process it again because it's going onto their proprietary file type, so that people can't. So we give it to them in MP3 because that makes the file smaller. That means that they can store more on their servers. But then by converting it to their own proprietary file type, which this is called transcoding. So at the end of the day, it's gone through 2 lots of conversion. That will affect the quality of what we listen to at the end of the chain. Okay, so what we do to get around that is we record as high a quality as we possibly can in terms of our bit rate and our sample rate. Now, these are things that we all need to learn about, and it sounds very geeky, it sounds very complicated, but it's really not. And there's information out there that you can find out
once
about.
It's broken down into
manageable chunks.
Yeah.
These are bits that come at the end. You know, when you get your book to the point where you want to distribute it. Okay, so there are all these things that you really do need to think about. So yeah, my advice is where you start the recording. If you're doing it over a period of 2-3 weeks, if you can, don't break the room down. Keep the room as it was when on day one. Always use the same techniques on mic. It's a learning curve. You know, you will learn eventually, and it's not going to happen overnight. But it's your product as well. You know, that's what I say to people. If you're putting your own material out there, you're responsible for it at the end of the day. You can't turn around to a publisher and say, oh, they didn't do a very good job of that. If you're the one that sat there doing your book, your audiobook, you're the one at the end of the day that has to sit there and take the flack when it arrives on Audible in terms of. Right?
And actually, even if you didn't do it, you've got to take the flak because you're the author, or
well, you have.
studio, or you're the.
I will caveat that though. Everything I've just said with. Audiobooks are subjective.
Yes.
Right? It's the same as music. Okay? I don't like heavy metal. I can listen to it, say I like
Books
it.
Are too.
Exactly.
Loads of very popular books, and people go, why? It's rubbish, it's terrible grammar.
Exactly.
Everyone's buying it.
And the same with production quality. You know, people are a little bit more forgiving than others. But what you got to remember is sometimes when you put these books up on Audible, sometimes, yes, you get your free book and you might only pay $14, but there are some people out there that might go through libraries pay a lot of money for these audiobooks, right? They will pay the publishers a lot of money to have these audiobooks in. So any problems with them, they're going to go, well, we just paid a lot of money for that. We want the quality to be okay. So even though you're not, you know, a massive publisher, you're doing everything yourself, you're doing it from home, still make it as good as you can get it. You know.
I do you know, just on that note, while it's popped into my head, I think this is what happened. Amazon gave authors power to self-publish free, easily. Genius. It's empowered people, but some people wasted that opportunity by just throwing unedited stuff up there, and then it gave self-published writers a bad reputation, and it's taken a long time to overcome that and say, hey, not everyone does that. We shouldn't do the same with audiobooks.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
And I'm going to say that because I'm a student, you know, I make a living out of it, but you know, we've spent a long time developing, you know, our studio, developing ways of making it sound better, making it sound consistent, all as best we can. Of course, the voice, you know, somebody's voice might be better than somebody else's. Somebody might have a really deep, rich voice, which is fantastic to listen back to. But some people may not have. Some people may have a weaker voice, and you've got to tweak it a little bit more in post.
Okay. So my final question to you then is, how important is it for beginners to build a portfolio, whether they're an author building up more books or a narrator, and how and what should they include in it?
Include everything.
But it's important to build a portfolio.
I'm going to plug my one question I had, or one thought I had a few weeks ago actually, was the same question you asked me: how many books have I done? what books have I done? And the only proof I've got of the books that I've done are the ones that mention my name that they're produced by or whatever, that are up on Audible. We don't always get mentions. The company doesn't always get mentions. So whatever's on my server is whatever I've done. So I've never actually kept in. So I've actually created this little book where it's like a diary that you can put all of your books in, and that helps to build your portfolio. Because the other reason is if somebody comes to me and you may have narrated your own book, right? And I've had this where I have had self-publishing authors come in and narrate their own book, but their voice has been that good that I've gone, have you thought about doing this for a living, right? And so, and some of them have gone, yeah, actually, I'd love that. In fact, one author I had he didn't want to stop. He actually loved doing the book. He's like, I've got to go home and write another book now. He really wanted, and so I said to him, well, if you really enjoy it, and I do know before sort of self-publishing became a thing, there was one author, I forget his name now, many years ago, but he used to narrate his own, and then he went on to narrate other people's books as well because he just enjoyed it so much.
That's what I think we're going to do, and I love the idea of this. So let's just have a look at this.
Yeah.
Is this on Amazon?
That's on Amazon, yeah.
Audiobook production log.
Yeah.
Absolutely genius, because then you can, as you say, just keep a log. And you were talking about something earlier where you get like a massive archive of data stored on servers going back 14, 18 years.
And to go through it all is just, I just haven't got the time to go through and put it into folders and make sure. I do it by publisher.
Yeah.
I suppose that's helpful in one way. But if it was a book that we did sort of, quite a few years ago, it's really hard. So with that, I just thought, well, you can have volumes, for a year. That is my 2024 book. So for example, a 2025 book. So I've got tangible evidence of what books I've done.
And also, this is what you need to do.
And I just think it's a nice thing to have. I just think because we don't, as producers, we don't often get a mention. It might say at the end of the books when we work for the bigger publishers, this was recorded at Electric Breeze or, produced by, which is nice. But not all of the publishers do that, and we don't get a shout out on all the productions that we work with. So it is nice where, people say, well, can you give us examples of your work? Well, yes, we can point them to the ones that are on Audible, maybe. But there are other books where we may have just done the editing, but we've had involvement in that book. We didn't record it. It might have been recorded. A lot of the publishers now have got their own in-house studios. That's changing the industry as well a little bit. It's certainly changing.
So are they getting rid of their studios, or are they getting more?
No, they're doing a lot more in-house, but I think that's more to do with the popularity of audiobooks because they're increasing the volume of the output. So what they're doing is, in effect, for want of a better term, is they're sharing the love. So they're recording what they can in-house. They're still sending it generally out to freelance editors to edit. But their overflow, we're still getting those books. Being based in Oxford and being close to a lot of academics, we're very fortunate that we get a lot of those reads as well. So that we're quite well placed for that. And that, as a company, that's helped us then because we get these lovely sort of academics coming and saying, "God, I didn't know there was a studio here," and of course then they do their podcasts, and so that's been good for us in that respect. But yeah, it's going back to the question originally. You've got to keep a good record of what you do and do it properly, because I think it is important to keep a record of what you've done without a shadow of a doubt. And then you can easily point people to those. You can. I mean, generally, if a publisher comes to me and said, "Oh, can you give us 2 or 3 examples of we want a narrator with this type of delivery, age group, this age group," and then I think, well, that's really handy for that as well. Who was that one I had on that? I can refer back, and then what I do is then go to Audible, find the link to that book, and then I'll send that link to the publisher and say, well, this is this narrator, if they've never heard them before. A lot of the time they know who they're dealing with, but sometimes maybe a book that, or they may need a narrator that they haven't heard of. Yeah. So we need to be able to point them. So we generally give them the Audible links. But I've got a nice trail now, so I can keep a trail of my of everything I've done. It's just as much for my own sanity, I think as much as anything else. But I think it is important. Yeah, keep a log of everything that you do.
And be organised from the start.
And be organised from the start.
It's easy to get lost, I find.
Yeah, and
I'm a project manager.
Yeah.
At work I'm organised, but then doing this for myself
yeah.
and running the business, it's hard to be as organised because I cut time on that.
Audiobooks are difficult enough. They are. I mean, to get it right, it takes a lot of work and a lot of effort, right, and a lot of practice. But I think we're all capable of doing that. Okay.
Yeah.
Everybody can do it. But just think about it's your production. Do you want it to sound good? Yes, please, because that makes it good for everybody. You know, it's like you say, if you push, just throwing out stuff that's been recorded in the kitchen, or it doesn't upset me in terms of so it's just people actually paying money for this.
It's got to be nice to listen to it.
Well, if
it's a lot of time, and they're paying money for it.
Well, I'm old-fashioned, if I buy something, I'd like to know it's okay.
Yeah.
And actually that's what I've always said to my everybody that's been involved in the process with us, my narrators, especially my proofers and my editors. That is something I have them keep in mind, is if they say, well, what standard do you want, Rich? And I say, well, the standard I want is, if you're buying it, what would you want? You want to buy something that's good. So have it in mind that ultimately, at the end of the day, somebody's paying money for it. If you were paying that money for it, would you like that edit to sound like it sounds? So just come at it from that angle, and I think that works from home as well. Think about it from the consumers.
Yeah. Because
ultimately we're trying to please them. Yes, we've all got egos, okay? As I do with my music, you want people to like.
I don't think you have a big ego, though. I think you're quite humble.
But you like
you're
people.
A giver, and
you're so kind. You're so kind. But we all like people to. We all want people to like what we do.
Yeah.
Right? Ultimately, so our ego is that's my ego. I want somebody to listen to something and go, yeah, that's good. I don't care if my name's on it. If somebody goes,
I see that more as caring about what people pay for and what you give them, and making there's value in it, giving.
I think that is important, and I think and you're totally right, and I totally agree with what Amazon and Audible have given us, and given people like yourself. They're doing they're really going for it, which I admire you so much for that, because and I say this to authors all the time that I work with. Gosh. I really wish I could. I mean, I write songs.
It's daunting and terrifying. It's not quite the same
as writing a 10-hour book or whatever, but a 3-minute song. But I do admire. So you put all that effort into it. Make sure it's worthwhile, and really don't bring it down. Don't just for the sake of getting it out there. Don't. Spend your time and take your time on it.
That's how I felt with my first studio when I got the results back. It's like, I'm not putting that out there. That's embarrassing. It's not the quality I want. I don't want that to be me and what goes out there and what I show self-publishing to be. I wanted to. Four Bears Bookshop in Caversham put a post out about me and said, this is someone who's self-published and done it well, not something we see that often.
Well, you have, and I noticed. Nice. I noticed that from our conversations that you care about what you're putting out there.
I want it to be quality. I want it to be professional. I want it to be good.
Yeah, and that is the one last thing I will say that I think is really, really important. And I think we sort of alluded to this earlier, but I will say that if you do go to a professional studio or a studio of any kind, absolutely 100% make sure that they have done audiobooks before, right? And if they say
and
yes,
don't just trust the answer.
If they say yes, we've done audiobooks, you say, can you show me?
Absolutely.
Give me the download links on Audible. If they say, I haven't got any up on Audible, say, well, have you got any on Findaway, on Spotify?
We can't
I haven't got any links. Well, I did it for a mate down the road. Believe me, okay? Because I'm not dissing that studio. They might be banging out #1 hit singles. That's their discipline, okay? Yeah. I don't bang out #1 hit singles because my studio is not for recording music other than what I do for myself in my own time, right? But we are a voice studio, and believe me,
it's very different.
there is so much difference in recording an audiobook to recording a 3-minute. It's a completely different discipline. Okay, it's like you get lawyers as an analogy.
I divorced one. Very different knowledge areas.
I did as well, actually.
Did you?
But anyway, but there are divorce.
That's a whole different interview.
there are divorce lawyers. There are family lawyers.
Commercial lawyers.
So they specialise, right? And it is very much the same with recording studios. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm very wary of. I would always be very wary, actually, when it comes to a studio that says that they can do voice. And seriously, because most studios are there to do music generally.
Yeah. And probably for their own music, but then they want to earn money so they can keep doing their own music, and that's what we have to be careful of.
I get quite frustrated sometimes because I get a lot of phone calls and a lot of emails from people saying, "Oh, I've got a band and we want to come in and record this," and I say, "Have you actually looked at my website?" And they'll say, "Well, no." I said, "Well, have a look at the website and you'll see that we do voice."
It's true though. Lawyers branch out. They don't. And I've had friends who used to ask my ex-husband, "Oh, can you just help me with this?" He's like, "No, I know absolutely nothing about that area of law."
No.
"Yeah, but you're a lawyer, you can figure it out." No, I won't
No.
touch it. Won't risk my licence.
No.
And it's the same with me in IT. I get friends and family turn around and say, "Oh, you work in IT. Can you build my computer?" Not really.
Well, it's like I use a Mac. I use Macs. I used to use Windows. I don't use Windows anymore. I use a Mac. I feel more comfortable on Mac. But if somebody asks me but it's a computer. We all use computers, but it's the type of computer that we use and what we're used to using.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's exactly the same with recording. So please, if you're gonna sort of push it out, I'm not saying use me. I'm saying just go to a studio.
Using me is brilliant.
Yeah, but I'm just saying go to a studio.
I wish I'd have come here first. And
that's all very nice.
I wish I'd have known what I know now, which is why I'm doing my course and this interview. To try and stop people wasting the money and the time that I have, giving that knowledge, giving back, same as you.
Yeah, I think it's nice to give back, and it's nice to know that audiobooks now they have become a really important part of publishing, and I think people have even the self-publish. Obviously the only block is cost. I get that as a commercial studio. Well, we're not a commercial. So it's a funny thing because although we are a commercial studio, but we're not. So it's kind of like we've got our clients and they're the only people that kind of use us. We still obviously advertise what we do, but nobody can just walk in off the street generally and say, "Oh, can you?" It's generally it's word of mouth really a lot of with self-publishing authors. But just do the job right, and please, for your own sanity, I think more than anything, if you're going to go that way, just make sure they can do audiobooks.
Yeah.
I just can't stress that enough.
And there's just not enough information on audiobooks out there, I find. So let me know what you think about this. If you have any other questions or any suggestions for anything else that maybe I can come back and ask Rich, because we've spent ages doing this, but my goodness, it's gone really fast. I found it really fascinating. It is a massive dump of knowledge, so rewatch it, because I just think this is so invaluable for when you get to doing audiobooks. And I'm going to buy a course. I'm going to have a bash at book 4 with Olivia on the course.
Yeah.
And I'm probably then going to throw it at you and go, "Please try and fix it," because I can't do it. But I think that would be really helpful. And then I can feed back on how...
to push the beauty of the course as well is because we're putting those audiobooks as part of the course. This is something that you can just redo and redo. And they'll hopefully there's going to be the groups there that will say, "Well, you could have done it this way, you could have done it that way," or somebody said, "Oh, I'm struggling with this. How do I get rid of that? This bit of software won't get rid of it for me, and how do I do it?" So there'll be the support there. That's the idea. Is that we're building a sort of a community where people, because I think the other thing is there is a community out there. LinkedIn is really good as well as it probably is for you. So I think I think that we found that's in the editing community. I've got lots of my fellow editors are on there. We all stay in touch, and even though we don't, even competitors, we stay in touch, because I think it's important for the industry, that we all see these changes, we know these changes there, and we all act as a group, or we try to act together.
Like you say, there is enough for everyone. There is no competition, and I found, and I promise you, I'm not making this up, the people who are editors, typesetters, studios, whatever, who've tried to scam or rip me or other authors I've spoken to off and overcharge, it's because they're desperate because they're not getting people.
Yeah.
And so actually, if you're genuine and you really want to help, like Rich here, you don't struggle for work. You know, there's not enough time in the day to be millionaires doing what we're doing and that anyway.
Well, I've been really fortunate. I've made a living out. I've made a living out of it. You know, and you know, it's the same as any business. You get good months, you get not so good months, but you know, we've done well out of it. And in terms of staying in work, and even with COVID, you know, it was that one industry. You know, when it happened, I just thought, God, I'm so blessed that
you're in something.
Because you know,
because the people in restaurants who had to close down, and they were self-employed, so they got no furlough. It was like, wow. I sat there going, I'm so glad I'm a digital nomad because wow, this would have been really horrendous. I think nothing changed for me. I was isolated and remote anyway.
Well, I think there have been a few repercussions in terms of they spent so much because they realised nobody knew how long it was going to go on. So they invested quite heavily. So I think maybe budgets over the last sort of 2 or 3 years have been a little bit lower than they would have been. But again, that will kind of grow and level out. But I think the other thing about COVID is it's really opened the doors for you guys. It's really opened up the doors for those that want to work from home, edit, record. It's doable. You know, go for it. That's what I say. Just really, but spend the time, just to learn how to. It doesn't take a lot really, but it's the same with anything in life. You only get better the more you do it.
Yeah, and I'm really looking forward to doing this course because I just think it will really help me do my own. I know I've got you to fall back on if I'm really struggling. I'm like, I need a better editor. I need your experience. I need your help, and that people can do that.
Yeah.
And I just think it's genius because people who otherwise would just have to drop the idea, because more and more people are getting diagnosed with special needs. More and more people are only reading. So many people, I've said, don't want to buy my books because they've got piles this high and they're not reading. They don't have time in the day to read. And I'm finding that as a passionate reading addict and an author, I've got books, I'm like, I can't believe it. It took me 3 months to read my last book.
Yeah.
Because I could only get 15 minutes here. And I thought, this is ridiculous. And I'm not a fan of audiobooks because I find that my mind drifts away. And I'm like, oh, I don't even know what I just listened to. So I like a hard copy. But even I'm starting to get audiobooks now because I can only read or listen to a book I want to hear as I'm cooking or washing up.
Yeah, walking the dog.
Or walking the dogs.
You know,
or getting on the train.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, it's the only way I'm going to fit it in.
Yeah.
So I do think that they are, self-publishing is a way of the future. Audiobooks and ebooks are a way of the future.
Yeah.
Print costs have gone so phenomenally high now. And then you've got to order all the books and transport them and take them back. I think the way of the future is quite digital.
I mean, print on demand. I think Amazon kind of got the model right. But again, there are ups and downs to these.
Their quality's not great. But do you know, I've learnt this year, normal printers, proper high street printers, the good quality stuff that the big publishers get, they're doing little people like me now.
Yeah, that's great, isn't it?
And that's a sign that the time's changing.
Yeah, they've got to diversify.
Like, yes. And print on demand.
Yeah.
With gardeners.
Yeah.
So that all the high street bookshops can build it. They've never done that before.
But it makes sense to them as a business model because it saves, and it's also part of this. You know, they don't have to waste paper. There's nothing being wasted. It's on demand. From that respect, it's fantastic. So there are all these changes that are being. I think COVID, as negative as it was, and people are still suffering, unfortunately, from it. Businesses and people personally, you know, there's people I know that have had long COVID and haven't been well. But there are positives as well, you know, that have taught us to things that have come out that have taught us to sort of pivot and look at things and deal with things in different ways. I think it's great for that. And
it's certainly changed everything the way it works.
Definitely. And you know, who's to know? I think the whole idea with this thing as well that I want to do is that next time people maybe are a little bit better prepared.
Yeah.
You know, I think there's that as well.
And I think this is so exciting. I hope you found this exciting as well. Like I said, put some comments in. Let me know if there's any other questions or suggestions. And I'll come back, ask Rich, and he'll look at the comments with me. I'm sure I'll put them out to you and say, hey, can you answer this? I can't answer this. And I just hope you found this as interesting and enjoyable as I do. Thank you so much. You're a star.
Thank you, Rachel.
I'm really looking forward to this course. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.